Hi guys, so today I'm going to teach about the capillary exchange, which basically is how different nutrients go to the capillaries and how they go into it and how they go out and the different pressures that affect it in the body. So the definition of the capillary exchange is the flow of water and dissolved particles from the capillaries to the tissues and from the tissues to the blood. And basically we'll talk about what nutrients are inside the capillaries and which ones go outside into the interstitial fluid, which is basically just fluid around different organs and body parts and the fluid of our bodies. And in that interstitial fluid, it carries things that cells need, which are nutrients, regulatory chemical messengers, and electrolytes. And then things that cells don't need is carbon dioxide, acid, and waste products from metabolic processes. So it puts things in the capillaries that takes things from them that they need, the cells need, and will put things back in that they don't need. So there's two sides of the capillaries. There's the arterial end and the venous end. On the arterial end, on both ends, there's 4 different pressures that will affect the capillaries and what's going in them and what's leaving them. So for the arterial end, the 4 pressures are number 1, blood pressure, which the blood pressure will usually drive the fluid and solutes out of the capillaries into the interstitial fluid, and that pressure is at 30. The second pressure is the blood colloid osmotic pressure, or known as BCOP, and this pressure forces water to move towards an area of more solutes. So this is usually going out of the capillaries, and it is at 28. The third pressure is the interstitial colloid osmotic pressure, or ICOP, and this osmotic force tends to move water out of the capillaries and into the interstitial space. And the osmotic pressure for that would be 8. And the last pressure is the interstitial fluid pressure, IFP. And this pressure is the fluid in the interstitial space puts on the capillary membrane. And the lymphatic system, which is in the interstitial space, pulls away fluid from the interstitial space, making it equilibrium and making sure that there's not too much fluid in the interstitial space that will cause the swelling. So the lymphatic system is really important to capillary exchange. So if we look here, we have pressures moving outside the fluid, pressures moving fluid outside of the capillary. There's the blood pressure, ICOP, and IFP. So you just want to remember those 3 are moving fluid outside of the capillary and into the interstitial fluid. Blood pressure is at 30, ICOP is 8, and IFP is at 3. So the net pressure going out would be 41. You can see if you just add them all up, be 41. And the pressure going inside the capillaries from the interstitial space is the BCOP, which is 28. So the net pressure in is 28. And then the total net pressure and the direction is you do 41 out, subtract it from the 28 in, and you get 13 going out. So that's how you would do the arterial end. For the venous end, the blood pressure is a little different. It's instead of 30, it's at 10 because of the significant friction as the blood flow from the arterial end to the venous end. It causes the pressure that blood puts on the capillaries to drop. So, like I said, the blood pressure instead of 30 is now 10 in the venous end. And then BCOP is it's the same thing on the venous end. It's at 28. ICOP is also the same. It is 8. And the IFP is the same, which is at 3. And it sometimes the IFP is expressed as a negative pressure, just because it is going out, or it's going out on the venous end, which can show negative. So the pressure moving out on the same thing is blood pressure, ICOP, IFP. Just remember that the blood pressure is different. And so the net pressure going out is 21 now. The pressure moving in is still 28. So the total net pressure and direction on the venous end, you take 21, subtract it from 28, and you get a -7 going in. And just the negative indicates the fluid being reabsorbed rather than filtered. So it's being reabsorbed back into the capillary because it's the venous end, and it's what it needs is those nutrients. So I drew a little diagram to kind of help visualize what that all means. So this big thing is a capillary. If you can see, the side is red for arterial end, this side is blue for venous end, and then just around it we have the interstitial space. This over here is the lymphatic vessel, which slowly sucks any extra fluid in the interstitial space. And on this side we have the blood pressure is 30, so it's going out of the capillary. The ICOP is going out 8. The IFP is going out 3, and then the BCOP is going in at 28. And so if here it's just the math, if you add all these up, the ones going out, subtract it from 28, you would get 13 out. Then on the venous side, blood pressure going out at 10 this time, ICOP going out at 8, IFP going out at 3, and then the BCOP going in at 28. Then if you add this up, subtract it from 28, you would get a -7 in. So that's basically the capillary exchange, just how the different pressures. One thing that it talks about in the reading is edema, and how that has a large effect on the capillary exchange. Edema is abnormal accumulation of fluid in the interstitium. So if we look back at this diagram, it's where the fluid is, there's too much fluid in this space, which would cause swelling usually in the body. And it talked about 3 different types of edema. There's a hydrostatic edema, which is excess fluid in interstitial space because of, number 1, an increase in the hydrostatic pressure inside the capillaries on the arterial or venous end. And it causes blood pressure in capillaries to increase. And usually the precapillary sphincters will control how much blood can go in, but if the blood pressure is above 160 for a long time, then more blood will go through and basically damage those sphincters. So that's not good. The second is permeability edema. Its macromolecules begin to cross the capillary, endothelial cell membranes, or interstitial cell membranes. The macromolecules increase the ICOP. So if we look back here, it would increase this ICOP, so it would be greater than 8. And usually what prevents this is like physical trauma or toxic chemicals. So it also just increased that fluid in the interstitial space. And number 3 is lymphedema, which occurs in the lymph vessel. So it would occur in this green thing, which usually is, it's like a vacuum. It sucks all that extra fluid in the interstitial space. So lymphedema is when the lymph vessels become damaged, and the damage results in obstruction of the lymph flow. So lymph vessels wouldn't be able to drain properly, causing edema. So those 3 are just 3 different types of edema, which it's just what is causing the swelling and or just the extra fluid in the interstitial space. So that's the capillary exchange.